Welcome to Top 10 Amazing Facts. Today, we're counting down the 10 most in-demand foods during the World Wars, the items people hoarded, craved, and rationed just to make it through. During World War I and II, everyday ingredients became rare luxuries, and people across the globe had to get creative just to survive. From soldiers on the front lines to families back home, food became a daily battle of its own. Before we begin, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on one of our awesome Top 10's number 10. Chocolate and sweets. Chocolate might seem like a treat today, but during both world wars it was practically gold. Chocolate wasn't just a luxury, it was a tactical tool. Soldiers were issued special military chocolate bars, like the American D ration, to boost energy and morale. Civilians, on the other hand, they had to line up and wait for tiny rations if they got any at all. In Britain, for example, sugar and chocolate were officially rationed starting in 1942, and that didn't end until 1953, nearly 8 years after the war was over. Families were allowed small monthly amounts, sometimes just 8 ounces of sweets per person, which meant one chocolate bar might have to be split among several people. And even then, the bars were often reformulated with powdered milk or alternative ingredients because fresh milk and cocoa were scarce. Fun fact, M&Ms were actually invented during World War II to solve a very sticky problem, literally. Chocolate that melted in soldiers' hands became useless, so scientists encased it in a sugary shell designed to withstand heat and humidity. Number 9. Canned foods. They were in very high demand and sometimes scarce, depending on where you were and what the war demanded. During both world wars, canned foods became essential for feeding troops. We're talking Spam, tinned milk, and canned corned beef, lifesavers on the battlefield and the home front. They were shelf-stable, easy to transport, and didn't require refrigeration, perfect for long deployments and unpredictable conditions. Military commanders leaned heavily on them, especially in World War I, when the U.S. government even promoted canning as a patriotic act. In World War II, tin, the metal used for cans, was in short supply because it was also needed for ammunition and medical supplies. That meant canned goods had to be rationed for civilians. Starting in 1943, the U.S. rationed over 300 processed items, including canned fruits, canned vegetables, canned juices, and canned soups. To ease the strain, people were encouraged to grow victory gardens and do home canning. By 1943, Americans canned over 4 billion jars of food, often in community canning centers. It wasn't just about food, it was about morale, self-sufficiency, and national unity. Number 8. Coffee and tea. These drinks were vital for morale, but importing them became nearly impossible as naval blockades and U-boat warfare disrupted trade. In Europe, people roasted barley or chicory as coffee substitutes. In Germany, acorn coffee became a thing. Tea was practically sacred in Britain and so crucial to British identity that the government made sure soldiers received their ration, even on the battlefield. The government took control of all tea stocks and rationed it carefully, 1 pound per person, meant to stretch to about 260 cups. Even amid bombings and blackouts, mobile tea canteens roamed the streets and battlefields, serving steaming cups to civilians and soldiers alike. It wasn't just about hydration, it was about comfort, routine, and resilience. For U.S. troops, coffee was as vital as bread and beef. In World War I, each service member was rationed 27 pounds of coffee per year. It was included in ration packs alongside canned food and tobacco. Soldiers brewed it in tin cups, canteens, or whatever they could find. Civilians were allowed 1 pound every 5 to 6 weeks, which worked out to less than a cup a day. People stretched their rations by double-dripping grounds, adding chicory, or even brewing reused grounds. In short, coffee and tea weren't just drinks, they were lifelines. They kept soldiers alert, civilians comforted, and entire nations grounded in ritual. Number 7. Eggs. Eggs were another high-demand item, especially because they're packed with protein and used in so many recipes. Eggs provided protein and versatility, but their short shelf life made them hard to keep in stock, especially as farms shifted production to meet military needs. Fresh eggs were often reserved for hospitals or military use. This, along with food shortages and livestock being slaughtered for meat, made eggs hard to come by. People resorted to powdered or dried eggs, and baking without fresh eggs became an art form. Eggless cakes, puddings, and even mayonnaise made with mashed potatoes became wartime staples. Cookbooks of the time were filled with instructions for making do without them and included recipes for eggless mayonnaise and cakes. Number 6. Dairy products. Milk and cheese may seem basic today, but they were highly coveted during both world wars. Fresh milk was a luxury in both world wars and was hard to come by, so people relied on powdered milk or evaporated milk, which was more shelf-stable. In many countries, including the UK and Soviet Union, milk was prioritized for infants, the sick, and pregnant women. Cheese was also strictly rationed or reserved for soldiers and factory workers. Some countries even developed processed cheese products specifically to stretch limited supplies. Number 5. Butter and cooking fats. Think butter, lard, margarine, and cooking oils. Why so valuable? Because they provided essential calories and were needed for almost every kind of cooking. Butter was hard to come by due to dairy shortages and transportation issues. It was heavily rationed across the US, UK, and most of Europe. In its place, people turned to margarine, lard, sweet, or even rendered animal fat from cooking. In the US, margarine was white and came with a packet of yellow dye. Families mixed the dye in themselves to mimic the look of butter. In some parts of Europe, even whale oil was used in margarine production. Number 4. Sugar. Sweet sugar, another food that quickly disappeared from kitchen shelves. It was heavily rationed because it was essential not just for baking, but also for preserving fruits and making canned goods last. Sugar was among the first items to be rationed in most Allied countries. In the US, families received sugar stamps limiting them to half a pound per person per week. Families adapted by using honey, syrup, or even molasses as substitutes. People had to get very creative, especially during birthdays and holidays. Without sugar, preserving fruits or making jams became difficult. People adapted by turning to molasses, corn syrup, honey, and even dried fruits. War cakes, sweetened with raisins or carrots, became popular alternatives. The shortage of sugar also had a huge impact on soda, candy, and baking industries. Number 3. Meat. Meat was among the most prized foods and also one of the first to be restricted. Beef, pork, and poultry were reserved for troops, while civilians had to make do with smaller cuts, organ meats, or meatless meals. Governments even launched campaigns like Meatless Mondays in the US and National Vegetarian Days in Britain to conserve resources. Households were urged to eat liver, kidney, tripe, or tongue, cheaper cuts that were not usually consumed. In Germany, meat scarcity led to the creation of Eintopf meals, one-pot dishes that used whatever meat and vegetables were on hand. Number 2. Bread and flour. Flour shortages hit hard, leading to creative solutions. Bread, the universal staple, was central to every meal, and flour shortages caused real panic. In Germany during World War I, they made Käsebrot, a bread made with potatoes and sawdust. In Britain, the government encouraged whole wheat bread, which was more nutritious and reduced waste. While in the US, the government encouraged baking with cornmeal, oat flour, or rice flour. Bakeries were regulated to ensure loaves met weight and nutrition standards. Bread riots, ration lines, and baking with alternatives like barley, oats, or even turnip flour became common. Number 1. Potatoes. And finally, the food that saved millions, the humble potato. The undisputed king of wartime food. Potatoes were cheap, filling, easy to grow, stored well, and were incredibly versatile. In both world wars, potatoes became the backbone of the working-class diet. They were used in everything from soups, stews, pancakes, and even bread. In Germany, potato-based coffee, flour, and alcohol became common. The Soviet Union also relied heavily on potatoes during World War II, often combining them with cabbage or beets. Without potatoes, many families would have faced starvation. In both wars, governments urged citizens to grow their own food, and potatoes topped the list in every victory garden. In Germany, Britain, and the Soviet Union, Potatoes often became the only reliable source of calories during times of crisis. They weren't glamorous, but they were life-saving. So, there you have it, the top 10 most in-demand foods during World War I and II. From the trenches to the dinner tables, these foods shaped survival and history in ways we often forget. If you found this video interesting, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more amazing facts from around the world and across time. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.